Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Colette and I'm here today from Witchways to answer your witchy questions. This is going to be a bit longer of a video, so I will break it up into chapters according to the questions so that you can skip around if you choose. Enjoy! So let's jump in. My first question is about witchy routines, daily practices, and also if I incorporate any witchiness into my mundane tasks. The things that I do most commonly are offerings to the ancestors, to the land, to deities, and it helps me set the tone for the day. If I'm going to be doing a lot of magic that day, I do a few more offerings and make a little bit more of a thing of it. When I wake up each morning, I greet the dawn and I just take a few moments to acknowledge that liminal space between passing from night and day. And if I'm going to do a lot of magic that day, I might say something like, "May the work I do today be pleasing in all the realms." I also acknowledge the crows that return from their night roosts, and I just say, "Welcome back." Notice them, notice what they're doing. I thank the songbirds that greet the dawn, and I also acknowledge the end of the day, and I thank the earth for another day here in this marvelous life. All these things just take a few seconds. As far as the second part of your question goes, I do have a lot of ways that I bring magic into my mundane. I buy lavender soap and I wash my hands and my body with that after I do any form of magic. And I often have a steam of blessing and clearing herbs going on the stove. So if I'm doing anything that requires wash water, like mopping, I just add a little bit of that to the water. I also charm my tea and coffee just with my breath and my intention and any other herbal teas I'm making. I also even do that with my food. As I'm putting the herbs in, I ask them to bring their magical qualities to my food, even if that is just deliciousness and delight. And I even do that with herbal teas that I make throughout the day. So I take each herb and I offer a moment of gratitude and ask the herb to offer its magical properties of clarity or blessings to my tea that I'm going to drink. I'm going to be adding some links in the description about various videos I've made that expand on some of these topics. So my next question is, how do you raise or dump power into a spell? This is a great question. And I will probably do a whole video on this, but I'm going to give a pretty complete answer here in simple forms. So the simplest is to charge a spell with breath or intention. And the way that you do that is to just mentally hold the intention that you want to go into the spell and breathe it into the working just with your breath as you visualize the words and things that you want to go into the spell. It's not what I really call raising energy, but it is a way that a lot of people charge things. Sometimes people also add a layer of emotion to that, feeling the thing that they desire in their body as they charge it with their breath or let it go out their hands and just give it a little push into whatever they're charging. Actually raising energy is a little different, what I call raising energy. So that is a little more formal. What I do is I pull in the energy of earth and sky into my body and let it build, feed it, let it build, get a little bigger, and then when it feels like it's ready to go, I say my intention and send that off. And a lot of people do that in more Wicca style types of magical practices. I also do that silently with building the energy by just raising it with my hands and visualizing that earth and sky energy moving up into my body, into my hands, and sending it off when it feels like it's reached its peak. The other thing that people do to raise energy is create what's called a cone of power. And again, this is used very commonly in Wicca and some other magical traditions. And the way that you do this is it's kind of similar, but you do it with a group. So everyone stands in a circle and they imagine the energy or feel the energy moving around the circle clockwise and building and building and building. And often people might be singing or toning, and when it's reached its peak, they raise it up and send it off. And this is the most common way that I raise energy for magic or spells in groups. I've done it hundreds of times. It's really helpful if you have a song or some music or drumming behind it to help the energy flow. Lavender Hazelwood has a short video on a slightly different type of raising a cone that you can do yourself. I'll put that link in the description as well. When you're done, you can earth the energy, and that is by putting your hands on the earth and imagine anything that's excess flowing into the earth. So the next question is if I would share any fast working money spells with things you can source mainly from nature. And I would have to say first, my caveat is that I do a little better with long-term money spells and abundance that slowly grow, but I do have a few things that I'll share with you around quick results. The first thing, if you want to source it yourself, is probably to work with plants. And I find that the fastest is the quick little growing new tips of plants, particularly evergreens like fir and pine that are associated with prosperity and new growth and grow very rapidly. You have to be careful when you're harvesting these because wherever you pinch off that growing tip, the tree will stop growing. It might branch or it might just stop growing in that direction, particularly with evergreens. Oak leaves and oak branches are really good for all kinds of luck, prosperity, abundance. I find they're a bit slower growing. You can even use acorns. So the thing that you do with these things is gather them, charge them with your intention, put them in a bag or a charm, and it's best if you carry it on you. To speed things up, you could add some spicy herbs like cloves or cinnamon. Not gonna probably find them in nature here. And I personally like, if I'm not limiting it to things that I find in nature, coins that are from places that my ancestors used to live. And I especially like, there's some coins from Ireland that I collect that have salmon on the back, and I really like adding those. I also usually add candles to money spells and charge that candle with my intention of abundance. This one is a great question about working with deities that are not from your background, that you're not familiar with, how to be safe. What about cultural appropriation, etc. when they just show up and maybe they're not from your background? Great question. I think this is part of an ongoing discussion that we don't have firm answers to, and there are many different opinions about cultural appropriation. The first thing I want to say is that I'm always respectful when a deity shows up, even if they're not from my background, maybe especially if they're not from my background. So I honor them and acknowledge them, even if I feel it's not right to work with them. And part of the question was also about, well, if they showed up, isn't it okay? And so in my experience, deities often do show up, and they really may not be concerned about cultural appropriation at all. Some of them are like, look, you're not from my descendants, go away. But a lot of them are like, yeah, whatever. However, the people that are alive and are struggling to maintain that tradition, often while being persecuted for it, do often care very much. And I think it's part of that discussion about where is that line around cultural appropriation. In this case, the deity was from Caribbean culture. A lot of times those beings have very particular desires about how they want to be approached, even if they're approaching you, and what offerings they want in order to work safely and respectfully with them. So some of those things might be things we don't want to do, like sacrificing animals. And so it's important to really be clear that they might show interest, but unless you actually know what the protocol is for approaching them, it could be not a good thing to do. I would suggest, if that being keeps showing up for you, to try and find someone who is genuinely from that culture and work with them if they want to work with you towards learning more about that being, which might be tricky unless you live in the southeast of the United States. If he keeps showing up, I would say to give him appreciation, thanks, and explain that your ancestors and that his people prefer that you work with deities of your lineage, if that feels right to you. I don't have many final answers on this because, as I said, this is an ongoing discussion because we're all kind of mushed together magically here in this time. I would say Hecate, if you're familiar with her, is also good for road openings, which is part of your question. And also there are saints that are closely associated with the being that you asked about. Saint Christopher, but Saint Peter, especially Saint Michael and Saint Anthony, are all associated with that particular Caribbean deity. So this one is about starting to work with the dead in a safe and respectful manner. And this person works with their known dead and ancestors, but when they encounter spirits that are haunting a house or space, they feel scared and don't know how to approach them, set boundaries successfully, or ask them to leave me be while I'm there. Any advice? Thank you. Another awesome question. So I'm going to, at the end, talk about what to do if you want to work with them, because I know that's part of your question, but I'm going to give some general guidelines for people who encounter ghosts and ghosts in general. So ghosts are beings that haven't crossed, and in general, you don't really want them in your house, with a few exceptions. I would say if it's not your house and you're sensitive to them, don't approach them or work with them. If you want to, and it is your house, you can check out my video on moving into a new home. I offer a triple clearing practice in there that usually gets rid of most ghosts if you want them gone. If you have to go somewhere that you know there are ghosts, and it's not your house and you can't really just go in and start banishing people's ghosts or speaking to them, you want to carry at least 3 kinds of protection on you if you are sensitive. And it sounds like you are, and it sounds like this is your work. But initially, carry at least 3 kinds of protections. So I carry a packet of herbs, cinnamon, rosemary, and maybe blue vervain if you can get it. I would carry this regularly for when you unexpectedly run into things. You can wear a protective oil like rosemary. There's also protective oils out on the market that you can use. Also a piece of jewelry that is charmed with protection. And dark stones or dark gems like obsidian are really good for this to wear. In your case, because your job is to speak with them, you need training in certain things. And you can get a lot of that from practicing online with videos. And so casting a circle, learning to throw up a protective circle really quickly, having allies that will protect you and work with you, and also practicing bringing magic through and information through and getting it as images and words. And this takes a little bit more practice and some training, maybe in person with someone, maybe in a class. That might be helpful. I also suggest pendulum skills. Yes, no, maybe. Is this safe for me? Should I proceed with talking with this spirit? That's a good beginning skill, is to get a pendulum and just start to really do that. I would say that being a medium is a highly advanced and wonderful skill to have, and just start slowly with noticing and developing the skills that are going to protect you and aid you in this work. And you can check in with me if you need clarification about this, because I know this is a huge topic. All right, my next question is, I'm living with chronic back pain and would be interested in learning rituals and practices surrounding pain management and healing. First, I just want to say I am so sorry you are dealing with that. I don't feel that the culture really has great answers around back pain in general. I would also say that with pain, there are some magical things that can support pain relief, but I haven't found things that completely deal with it. Here's some things I've done with health in general that have been successful. So the first practice that you can do is to feel the energy of earth and sky, gather that up into your body and bring it into your hands in a globe in whatever way feels right to you. Let your hands get warm, and then you can imagine or feel that practice of energy moving into your back, or you can actually place your hands and imagine that going into your back in the area of the pain. The other thing that might be helpful is carrying oak bark or an acorn as a support for general health and healing. Oak is pretty amazing and can be very helpful on the magical, energetic level. You can also burn it as incense on charcoal if you choose. It just helps contribute to overall health and resiliency. I don't feel it directs the pain, obviously, directly. A couple of things that I've been successful with friends. If you have resources for a healer outside of the medical care industry, or even if you have the resources to see a practitioner within medical industry, I would say to do a spell to find a healer who can help you with your pain. And that can be super simple. You can just light a candle and charge it with your breath, like I talked about earlier on, with bring me a healer, bring me a healer, bring me a healer. It can come through referral or direct finding it yourself. Bring me a healer, bring me a healer. And just say that and breathe that into the candle, and then notice things that happen. You might ask friends or community or in some of the chronic pain groups online if they've found anyone who's super helpful, and then just notice who really stands out and pops up. I'm not assuming you have the resources to do that. You may not, lots of people don't. Another technique that I've used is to speed up a medical practice that is not quite here yet, that is in the works but hasn't made it to the public yet. And that can be really helpful, and ask for one that can help you. And the way to do that is to just, again, light a candle and feel your intention in your body and repeat it a few times to bring that medical technique to you. You can write your desire down on a piece of paper and slip it under the candle if you want, and then let the candle burn all the way out. If you can't let the candle burn all the way out, it's important to snuff it rather than blow it out. All right, my next question is about augury, which is the practice of divining through the observation of birds, and was practiced heavily during Roman times, even with domestic things like chickens. This person enjoys bird watching and would like to incorporate some of that into their magical practice. So that's great. I have to say, I have not found a lot on that. I watch birds myself, and I have a lot of birds that show up in my yard, and so I haven't been super successful. There is one book that I've been kind of interested in for a while. that's called Auguries and Omens, and one of the things I like about it is that it doesn't just talk about Roman techniques, which is where you find the most information on bird auguries, but it talks about information from other cultures as well, like Celtic, Germanic sources. The problem is it's $142 and there's not many places that have it. I have found for myself the information I've gathered has been often through animal oracle decks. I really like some of the Celtic animal oracle decks because that's my background and I feel like I have an affinity for that. Also, there was an author in the 1400s named Agrippa who wrote and collected information on the Roman practice of augury with birds and listed the different meanings of them when you see them. It's a very dry read and you can't really get it online. Again, this is an expensive book, but there are a lot of PDFs for free. I haven't ever read the whole thing and it seems like every time I go to it, it takes me to a different PDF that has different things. So if you search Agrippa augury, you might be able to just print out that PDF or download it and work with it. Sorry, I don't have more on that. The next question is a triple hitter, so they're short, so I can actually answer all three of those. The first part is, how do I find others to practice with? This is a good one. Meetups, that's an organization that you can Google and they have local groups for almost everything from rock hounding to witchcraft, and there may be one in your area. Check it out. The other thing you can do is that a lot of Facebook groups are available if you're on Facebook. There's some Instagram communities, and a lot of YouTubers have Discord communities where you can at least interact with people online or sometimes meet in person. Patreon is the same. I have a Patreon account that has a small group of people that we talk to each other on Facebook. You might also consider starting a chat group yourself of some kind, whether it's locally meeting up with people to talk about books. That's always a good topic. And just, what are your favorite books? That's a great way to get to know people and what they think and how they work. And then if there's people you like, you might invite them for a tea and tarot session in a cafe or a park to just meet them and see if you like them. That's one way to do it. Also, you can just take a local class if there's a local teacher who offers witchcraft and see if you like the people in that group and pursue friendships starting slowly at the beginning. The next part of that question is, how do I know if it's a good time of day to practice? And that totally depends on what your need is, but in general, dawn and dusk are seen as the times that are what's called liminal spaces, meaning in between, and that's a time when the veil between the worlds is thin. My second choice after that is nighttime, just because I'm done for the day. The energy of the city around me is a little quieter. Sometimes I practice magic at noon to really call on the power of the sun if I want an expansive, radiant kind of magic, or I'll call on full moon and do my magic at full moon for that same reason. My next question is, how do I manifest a house purchase? This is a special and specific house that would be very beneficial for my family and allow more ease, happiness, and joy into our life. This is a great question because there's a lot of different philosophies and views about manifesting things like this. So for some people, feel that you should not ask for a specific house magically. Others feel like you should just go for it and say, I want this house. My personal view is somewhere in between, that it's best to say, yes, I want this house. Let me be successful at this, but this house or better, That way, if there's something that you aren't aware of that would not be good for you with this house, then the universe will offer you something else. My first thought is to do a success spell with the caveat, as I said, of this or better. And there's lots of ways. Here's one way to do it. The first thing you do is you start to make an altar, and you'll need salt, a picture of the house or the address. You'll need a candle. Green or yellow works, but you can use white as well. You need some herbs, and they should be herbs that work with success. And that could be cinnamon, rosemary, basil are three that come to mind for me. This is a long spell and a big spell. I would cast a circle and clear the space, set up an altar. I would ask, once I've done that, for any beneficial spirits or deities that have my best interest at heart to join me. Ancestors are very helpful because they're very interested in the financial abundance, prosperity, and continuance of the family line. Then place salt in a ring around your candle. You can add those herbs around the candle as well, or if you want, you can burn them as an incense on charcoal. Add the picture or the address of the house to your altar, and this can also be on a plate or a tray. Then you want to light your candle, read your intention, or place it on the altar or spell space, and let your candle burn completely out. Since this is a big spell, you might want a long burning candle, and you can do one of two things. Again, this is something people have different views of. Some people remove the candle and put it in a shower. What other people do is take the whole plate, which is why I like to do it on a plate or a tray, and take it and place it in the shower or somewhere where it's not going to catch anything on fire when you're not attending to it. This is best done from new moon to full moon. All right, my next question is a double one. And it's, how do I call in the directions and the specific language and tools to use for casting a circle and closing a circle? I have a really great short circle casting video on YouTube that's one of my most popular ones. I'll put that link in the description. I also have a very in-depth 2-hour workshop I just did on that I recorded. My ego has to tell you that it was on Zoom, so the video quality is not that great, but it is really good, and that's something you can purchase from me. But I can give you a good quick synopsis here because this really is a whole class. I'll start with directions. Directions, it depends. Some people are very formal with this, and they have a whole long saying in ceremonial magic. I'm not a ceremonial magician. So what I usually do is I turn to that direction, I feel its energy in my body, and I say something like, I call to the element of air, and then maybe I add a few sentences about the properties of air, and then I end with welcome air and turn to the next direction and do the same. A lot of people have much more elaborate ways of doing that and visualizations. Casting a circle, as I said, I have a video, but basically what I do is I pull up energy of earth and down, sky, down from above into my body, and imagine that mixing, and imagine that I can feel it or actually feel it, and imagine it expanding and feeding me. Then I let that energy run through my hands, and I cast it out and draw a circle around me or the group. Sometimes I use a knife or a wand. As for things I say, the most frequent thing that I do is I'm kind of silent while I'm casting the circle, although lots of people do have things that they say at that part. And then at the end, I say, by all that is above and all that is below. The circle is cast, We are between the worlds, and what happens between the worlds affects all the worlds. So that's something, one piece that's slightly more ceremonial that I incorporate into my practice. So the next part of this was protection magic. And I do have a video on protection magic, and the house video, again, I think is super helpful because we spend the most time in our home. And I would say learning to cast a circle fast is good protection. That's a really important skill to have. And protection in general depends on what you're needing protection from. Regular clearing of your house, your car, and your workspace, if you can do that discreetly, is going to take care of 9/10 of it. You can use tea or clearing herbs like rosemary. Just make a tea of that, put it in a spritz bottle if you're at work, and just spray it around your space. That will provide some protection. You can also charm jewelry for protection. I talked about that in an earlier question, and I also talked about charging things at the very beginning. That was the second question I answered, so you might want to review that, how to charge things. And you can charge objects with protection. And I just hold them and visualize protection, give it a little push with my breath and push some power into it. The other thing you can do is start to find guardian allies that you might work with who are helpful in supporting and protecting you. And those can be animal allies, they can be any kind of allies. You can also work with creating a small bundle or bag of herbs that you carry hidden on you that are protective. Again, rosemary is really good, but one of my favorites is rosemary, lavender, and blue vervain together. You can substitute agrimony for that if you want, or oak if you can't find agrimony or blue vervain. Those are my favorites, but there's a million protective herbs out there. You can also hang those in doorways or windows and in your car. One herb that I know that's kind of specific for traveling is yarrow, to place that in a bundle in your car. It's especially good for overseas, but it works with cars as well. So I want to say that I'm going to post a bunch of videos in the description, and some of these topics I may make whole videos on or even do workshops on in the future because they're such big questions, so keep your eye out for that. If there are questions about some part of what I went over that you need clarification on, please put that in the comments. And if I got what you were asking wrong and answered a question that was not what you were actually asking and you meant something else, please put that in the comments and I'll clarify it as well. If any of you have other answers and practices about these things, I'd love that you put that in the comments. I feel that as a community, it's best if we all work together, and there's a lot of knowledge out there. I'm not the only one that holds that knowledge. So until I see you next time, stay safe and be well.